Hey Amy, I have a question for you. If I'm purchasing a home, what type of inspections do I need to consider?
Well, that's a great question, and actually that could cover a lot of information. I just so happen to be looking at the Oregon Properties Seller Advisory for 2023, and it talks a lot about the kinds of things that you should be considering when you're purchasing a property. So if you are buying in Oregon, you should ask your real estate broker about this. There's a lot of really great information, but as far as inspections, it really depends on the buyer and also the property that they're purchasing. So I always recommend a whole home inspection. And by whole home inspection, it really just kind of touches the surface of all the different systems in the house. And when you do that inspection, you can often tell if something else needs to be inspected more carefully. So most home inspectors aren't going to say, hey, this furnace is bad. They will say something like, hey, I think you need to have this furnace inspected by an HVAC professional. Or, I think there's about 3 to 5 years left on this roof, but because of this granule loss on the shingles or some curling shingles, things like that, they might say, they might recommend that you get a roofing company to come out and take a closer look at the roof. So those are just a couple of areas, of course, but other inspections that I might recommend are a sewer scope, especially, well, actually anytime. If it's a brand new property, a sewer scope is even a good idea because during the construction process, the big trucks could crush the sewer lines and that can create real problems for you when you move in.
What does a sewer scope entail?
So the sewer scope, they'll put a camera down the sewer line and they'll run it through and make sure there's no root intrusions or breaks in the line, that sort of thing. So it's a really good idea, especially if you're out there and you see a lot of big trees on the property. Good idea.
When they say invasive inspections, because I've heard that term before, what does that mean?
So an example of an invasive inspection, sometimes with a sewer scope, if they can't get the line scoped from an access point outside, I've seen where they've had to remove the toilet in order to get the scope done. That would be invasive. Another example would be like asbestos testing. If they're going to test for things like asbestos, then they might have to remove a section of like a tile or something in order to test that. So that would be invasive, and you would want to make sure you got the seller's permission to do that. So those are other tests that people could do. Another popular one is a radon test. And because radon is the second leading cause of lung cancer in the United States, that can be very important for some people. Radon is a naturally occurring gas, and it's going to be in the air wherever you are, but in some areas you have a higher concentration. So you would want to know that. If you're somebody who stays in your house a lot and you don't open doors and windows, then that would be important. If you're in a home that has a basement, often radon can settle into basement areas. There's just sections of areas in certain parts of towns or states where the ground is rockier, and sometimes there's going to be a high prevalence of radon in those areas, but you don't know unless you test. So that's one that you could do. There's just so many different kinds of inspections that you could have done. You need to figure out what's important to you. Another one, if you're buying country property, you might have a well. So there's all kinds of testings you can do for a well, such as flow, what's in the water. They could test it to see what kinds of toxins are in the water. In Oregon, they have to test for arsenic, nitrates, and total coliform bacteria. By law, the seller has to test for those things. But if you're a buyer that's concerned about other things like lead in the water, you should ask for that test to be done. And also, if you have a septic system, you should inspect that system because that can be a very, very costly thing for you to have to fix when you move in. So anyway, that's just a few examples of inspections, but you should definitely talk to your real estate broker, tell them your concerns, and also ask them about things in that area that they should be looking out for.
Thank you. That was awesome information.